Open the podcast bay doors, Hal.
Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 113 of Welcome to Geektown. I'm your host, Kurt Onstead. I've been a proud geek all my life, being into role-playing games, board games, sci-fi, fantasy, and especially superheroes and comics. And I want to help others join me in those pursuits, but I found that sometimes people can get overwhelmed or feel left out because they don't already have what some consider the requisite knowledge to be considered a fan. And that's where Welcome to Geektown comes in. Here, you can ask your questions without feeling like a gatekeeper is calling you out for not yet being fully versed in every aspect of your new interest. It's the last day of March, so it's time for this month's shout-out to my patrons. Justin Bailey, Lily Breen, Jesse Clark, Ricky Garvin, Rob Garrison, Forrest Woodward, Aaron Borst, Carla Hoffman, Lyndon Onstead, Julio Herrera, Matthew Saint, and Utuk Zul. I want to thank each and every one of you for your continued support. Remember, it's just $1 per month to join in and get this monthly shout-out, as well as full scripts and audio outtakes. Now, on to the show. 4 years and 2 days ago, I released the first episode of Welcome to Geektown. It's been my tradition to make the anniversary episodes relate to my favorite superhero, Speedball, and the team of young heroes he's most connected to, the New Warriors. Over the years, we've covered the team's first volume, which ended with issue number 75, released in June of 1996. 3 years later, a new creative team pitched a New Warriors revival, and that ended up as the 10-issue Volume 2. Plus a prequel issue number 0 available in Wizard magazine. Jay Farber wrote the entirety of the series, with Steve Scott on art for the first 3 issues, and the 0 issue, guest artists Carl Kerschel, Chris Renaud, and Jason Armstrong helping out for issues 4, 5, and 6, and Jamal Eigel taking over as the regular penciler for the remainder of the run. Derek Robertson, the penciler for issues 26 through 50 of Volume 1, provided cover art for the great majority of the issues. Let's take a look at the characters that comprised that version of the team. When the first issue opens, we see Speedball trying to put the team back together again. Although they were still together at the end of Volume 1, at some point in the intervening time, they fell apart and went their separate ways. Speedball approaches fellow founders Nova, Nita, Night Thrasher, Firestar, and Justice, the latter two who were on the Avengers at the time, but all of them turn him down for one reason or another. He even asks Brief member Alex Power and allies Cloak, Dagger, Darkhawk, and the Slingers team, but they also give their own excuses for turning him down. However, when Nova and Nita show up at the Crash Pad, the team's headquarters in Volume 1, to cheer Speedball up after his failed attempt, they happen to get a call for help from Genetech, a genetic research company seen often in the previous volume as both an ally and a foil, depending on the story. During their experimentations into other dimensions, in comics one science is as good as another, the company accidentally released Blastar, one of the Fantastic Four's recurring villains, onto Earth. Along the way to the research facility, they run into fellow former teammate Turbo, aka Mickey Musashi, as well as mutant hero Bolt. As the fight ensues, Nova gets thrown by the villain across town and happens to run across a new local hero named Aegis. After some cajoling from some local fans of the hero, Nova brings Aegis along to help defeat the extra-dimensional threat. They eventually take down the would-be world conqueror and leave him on an uninhabited world back in his home dimension. This opening issue very much mirrors the first issue of New Warriors Volume 1, with a mix of characters from across the Marvel Universe, some recruited and others just happening by, coming together to form a new team. Also similar to that original team origin, the Avengers show up after the fight is over and are given the credit in the media for what the New Warriors did. After this, Speedball is able to convince Nova, Nita, Turbo, and newcomers Bolt and Aegis to join the team. Speaking of Bolt and Aegis, let me introduce you to them and see what they brought to the team. Starting with Bolt. As I mentioned, Bolt, birth name Christopher Bradley, is a mutant. And as befits his name, he has electrical powers. He first appeared in X-Men Unlimited number 8, an oversized quarterly book that came out in the 90s, where he first manifests his powers while at school. He's quickly recruited by the X-Men. In the New Warriors book, he refers to his friends Iceman and Beast several times, and apparently trains with them for several weeks, before learning that he is one of many mutants affected by the legacy virus, causing his powers to go out of control occasionally and potentially killing him one day. The legacy virus was an ongoing plot point in the X-Men titles throughout the 90s, and was seen by many as an allegory for the AIDS crisis. Despite this setback, Chris decided to go to New York, where his girlfriend Donna lives, and become a hero, which is where he meets up with the New Warriors. Bolt hides the disease from his teammates for most of the 10-issue run. The way many subplots are quickly wrapped up in the last 2 issues, you can tell that writer Jay Farber had planned to keep the book going for a while, but that its sudden cancellation forced him to rush to a conclusion for the seeds he had planted. After the New Warriors ended, Bolt was folded back into the X books briefly, showing up in Weapon X number 6 as the new Maverick after the original, a character who had helped Bolt in his early days, disappeared. We learn in this story that the first Maverick had been brainwashed and was working for the Weapon X program again. Bolt tried to free his mentor, but they ended up fighting instead, and Bolt was killed in an explosion. Bolt was one of many mutants brought back in the Necrotia storyline, using a modified version of the Phalanx virus that changes people into techno-organic beings. Those brought back by this process were all dead again by the end of that story, but with the current version of the X-Men apparently able to resurrect any mutant at will, it's possible that Bolt has returned once again and just hasn't been active in any stories. One final note on Bolt before we move on to Aegis. Of all the New Warriors, past and present, so far Bolt is the only regular member that has made the transition to the big screen. Reserve member Dagger co-starred on her TV show with Cloak, and as of this recording, rumors float around about an upcoming Nova show/movie. I'm not counting Jubilee or Angel from Volume 4 for reasons I'll get into in a future episode. Played by Dominic Monaghan in X-Men Origins Wolverine, his powers are portrayed slightly differently, as instead of bolts of lightning, he can use his ability to control electricity to take over any electrical/electronic device. Like his comic counterpart, he's also killed in this live-action adaptation. The other big difference between the two is that Dominic portrayed Chris using his English accent, despite the comic book version of the character growing up in New York. The other new member of the team, as I've mentioned, is Aegis, aka Trey Rollins. In the Zero issue, we see Aegis's origin, such as it is, as Trey discovers a golden breastplate in an abandoned building. In issue number 1, he's been an active superhero long enough to have garnered a small following of fans who graffiti his name on buildings and talk up his exploits to each other, and Nova when he shows up later. It's unknown exactly how much time has passed between the prequel issue and the start of the series proper, but obviously it's long enough that Trey discovered that the breastplate gives him powers when he wears it, and to start using them to fight local crime and get some attention while doing so. When he is wearing the breastplate, or Aegis, as that's what the word means, Trey is able to absorb most any attack, physical or energy, and store it up to blast back at his attackers. It isn't until the final issue of the series that we learn where the magical breastplate came from. In that issue, Hercules sees Aegis on TV and goes to confront the young man, thinking he stole the artifact somehow. Instead, upon taking Aegis and the rest of the team to Olympus, we discover that Athena, the original owner of the breastplate, had left it for Trey to discover, as she had chosen him as her champion on Earth. We saw Trey show up a couple of times after the New Warriors run was over, mostly in background shots with the rest of the team. Unfortunately, Trey's time as Athena's champion was cut short a few years later, when the breastplate's powers failed him after jumping out of a window during a confrontation with the Huntsman, one of Hercules' villains. Huntsman then used Trey's body to bait Hercules and Athena into a trap where he and Hera ambushed the pair. This storyline was in issues number 127 through 131 of Incredible Hercules, during a period when Hercules took over the title from Hulk. Written by Fred Van Lante and Greg Pak, with Dietrich Smith providing the art. Since his death, Trey's spirit appeared once to Amadeus Cho, at first a supporting character for Hulk and Hercules, later becoming a hero in his own right. Check out episode 44 of the show for more on his history. Given his mythological ties, it wouldn't be difficult for some other writer to bring him back from the dead if they wanted, but for now, both of the characters added to the New Warriors for Volume 2 appear to be in comic book limbo. Overall, I think the creative team did a good job capturing the spirit of the original while adding their own ideas as well. The biggest flaws of the book come down to pacing issues. As I mentioned earlier, it's obvious that Jay Farber had long-term plans for the book, and so various subplots are introduced that would be able to pay off much later as long story arcs, but instead all get crammed into the last 2 or 3 issues. One subplot, originally involving Night Thrasher, actually gets wrapped up in a 4-issue miniseries titled Iron Fist and Wolverine: The Return of Kunlun, also written and drawn by Faber and Eigel, that's promoted on the last page of the final issue of Volume 2. Personally, I would have liked to have seen where the team went in this new incarnation a little longer. Instead, we got another 5-year absence as the team showed up occasionally in the background of stories with big multi-team fights until their return in Volume 3. And we'll get into that next volume next year for the 5-year anniversary. In the meantime, I'll be covering the Moon Knight show for the next 6 weeks. If you want to hear the full, unedited audio between myself and guest, author John Mulhall, you can join the Patreon for just $1 per month and get that special version of the show before anyone else. Otherwise, the edited versions will come out on Thursdays, just like normal, a week and a day behind the TV show. Once that's over, it'll be back to listeners' questions, which have been a little lagging recently. Please send me any geeky questions you have that you'd like answered in a future episode. You can send any and all of those via email to welcome2geektown, all spelled out, @gmail.com. Or you can go to the website, welcome2, the number 2 in this case, geektown.com, and click the Submit a Question link if you'd prefer to remain anonymous. Other contact options include facebook.com/welcome-to-geektown or Twitter @geektownpodcast. Also, if you'd like to support the show directly, come join the Patreon at patreon.com/welcome to Geektown for just $1 per month to get access to full scripts of the shows, audio outtakes, and a monthly shoutout. You can also help the show grow by subscribing and giving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts to join the Geektown City Council, which helps other people find the show so we can all tell them, welcome to Geektown, population, us. Welcome to Geektown is written, narrated, edited, and produced by me, Kurt Onstead. Theme music is by Aaron Lovitz, logo art by Archie Santana. All other sound clips are the copyrighted material of their respective owners, and no infringement is intended, falling under fair use.